Google just quietly updated its terms of service, and buried inside a policy document most people will never read is a change that takes effect in 2026, and it affects every single account you own. Gmail, Google Drive, YouTube, Google Photos, everything tied to that one login. This isn't a rumor, it's not a leak. It's published on Google's own support pages. And the reason most people don't know about it is simple. Google didn't exactly announce it with a press release. Let me show you exactly what's changing, what it means for your data, and what you need to do before this rolls out. What the policy actually says. Let me break down exactly what this policy says, because the language Google uses is deliberately vague, and that vagueness is doing a lot of work. The updated terms expand Google's rights to process your data across its services for what they call service improvement and personalization. That's the sanitized version. What it means in practice is that your activity in Gmail can now inform what you see in Google search. What you store in Drive can feed into how Google's AI products respond to you. Your YouTube watch history, your location data from Maps, your purchase confirmations in your inbox, all of it becomes part of a unified behavioral profile. Think about that for a second. Before this change, Google's data practices were already extensive, but there were at least partial walls between services. This policy tears down those remaining walls and makes cross-service data use not just permitted, but the default. Security researcher Zach Edwards, who has spent years documenting how ad tech companies track users, noted in a 2025 analysis that consolidated data policies, like this one, dramatically increase the value of any single account compromise. In plain language, if someone gets into your Google account after 2026, they don't just get your email. They get a complete digital portrait of your life. According to the Electronic Frontier Foundation, Google already holds more personal data per user than any other company on the internet, and that assessment was made before this policy. Change expands data sharing across its own ecosystem. The UK's Information Commissioner's Office issued guidance in late 2024 warning consumers that broad consent bundled into terms of service updates may not meet the legal standard for meaningful consent under data protection law. That's a regulator telling you, in careful legal language, that clicking I agree on one of these updates might not actually be a valid agreement, but Google is counting on you to click it anyway. Here's where the real-world impact hits home. We're not talking about abstract data. We're talking about what you're searching at 2 a.m, what medical questions you're typing into Gmail to your doctor, what financial documents you've uploaded to Drive, what your kids look like in every photo you've stored in Google Photos since 2015. All of it processed, analyzed, and used to build a product that Google then sells access to. Not your data directly, the version of you that your data creates. If you've ever felt like Google's ads knew something they shouldn't, you weren't imagining it. This is why. What Google actually is. To understand why Google is doing this, you have to understand what Google actually is. Because it's not a search company, it hasn't been for a long time. Google is an advertising business. 90 cents of every dollar Google earns comes from advertising. And the way you make more money in the advertising business isn't by showing more ads. It's by making those ads more precisely targeted. That requires data, not just data, the right data, deeply connected, cross-referenced, and constantly updated. When Google launched Gemini, its AI assistant, they made a point of saying it would learn from your preferences to serve you better. What they glossed over is that teaching an AI model requires enormous amounts of behavioral data. And your Google account, with 15 years of search history, email content, and document storage, is an extraordinarily rich training resource. The 2026 policy change isn't just about advertising. It's about AI. It's about using your historical data to improve products that Google will then monetize separately from any direct advertising relationship with you. Here's the thing that really bothers me about this. Google didn't have to do it this way. They could have offered a genuine opt-in. They could have separated AI training data collection from basic service functionality. They could have said, we'd like to use your data for this purpose. Do you agree? Instead, they buried it in a policy update and set it to opt out, knowing full well that the vast majority of users will never find the setting, let alone change it. It's like a landlord quietly rewriting your lease to allow them to inventory your belongings, then mailing it to you in an envelope marked Important Account Update. When I went through the updated policy language myself, the phrase that stood out was legitimate interest. That's a legal term Google uses to justify data processing without explicit consent in certain jurisdictions. The problem is, legitimate interest is supposed to be weighed against your privacy rights, and based on the scope of what this policy enables, it's hard to argue that balance is being struck in your favor. Security experts warn that policies framed around legitimate interest are increasingly being challenged in European courts, and for good reason. You might be thinking, I've accepted Google's terms before. How is this different? And it's a fair question. The difference is scale and consolidation. Each time Google updates its terms, the boundary of what they can do with your data shifts slightly outward. Individually, each change looks minor. Cumulatively, over 10 years, you've handed over something you never explicitly agreed to give. So what can you actually do about this? Let me show you. 4 things to do before 2026. Here's the good news. You still have time, and there are 4 concrete things you can do right now to protect yourself before this rolls out. None of these require you to delete your Google account or abandon services you rely on. This is about reclaiming control within the system that already exists. The first thing is your Google activity controls. Open your Google account settings, go to myaccount.google.com, then click on Data and Privacy. You'll find a section called History Settings. Inside, you'll see web and app activity, location history, and YouTube history all listed. Each one has a toggle and, crucially, an auto-delete setting. Turn off auto-delete and set them to delete after 3 months at most. Better still, go through each one and use the Manage Activity option to manually delete what's already there. This is data Google has been holding. Some of it goes back years. Delete it. It takes about 15 minutes. The reason this matters for the 2026 policy is simple. Google can only process what it has. Less stored data means less to consolidate and cross-reference once the new policy takes effect. The second thing is your ad personalization settings. Still inside myaccount.google.com. Go to Data and Privacy. Then scroll to Ad Settings. You'll find a toggle called Ad Personalization. Turn it off. This doesn't make the ads disappear. Google will still show you ads, but it stops them from using your behavioral profile to target those ads. You'll also want to click into Ad Personalization is on before you turn it off, because inside that screen you can see exactly what categories Google has assigned to you. Seriously? Go look. It's equal parts fascinating and unsettling. Topics like your estimated income bracket, your health interests, your relationship status, all inferred from your behavior. Turn it off. The third step is reviewing your connected apps. Go to myaccount.google.com, click Security. Then scroll down to your connections to third-party apps and services. Most people have dozens of apps connected to their Google account that they've completely forgotten about. Old fitness trackers, shopping apps, games. Each one has some level of access to your Google data. Revoke anything you don't actively use. Every connected app is another potential surface where your data can leak or be compromised. And the 2026 policy's cross-service data consolidation makes this even more relevant because these third-party apps may be pulling from a larger pool of your integrated data than before. The fourth step is the one most people skip, and it's arguably the most important. Start migrating critical data out of Google's ecosystem. I'm not saying delete everything. I'm saying don't keep all your eggs in one basket. For email, ProtonMail offers end-to-end encrypted email and a free tier that's genuinely usable for most people. Your emails are encrypted in a way that even Proton cannot read them, which means they can't be processed for advertising or AI training. For document storage, a combination of local storage and an encrypted cloud backup, something like Proton Drive or a self-hosted solution, removes your most sensitive files from Google's reach entirely. This migration doesn't happen overnight, but starting now, before 2026, means you're making a deliberate choice rather than a panicked one. A quick note before we go further. If you use Google Workspace through your employer or your own business, some of these settings may be controlled at the organizational level and not individually accessible. Enterprise and education accounts often have different policy terms than personal accounts. Check with your IT administrator before changing settings on a work account. These steps are designed for personal Google accounts, standard consumer Gmail, Drive, and related services. Also, none of what I've described involves disabling Google's security features. Keep your two-factor authentication active. Keep your account recovery options current. Privacy and security aren't in conflict here. You can protect both. Your terms, not theirs. Here's the bigger truth. Nobody in tech wants to say out loud, the relationship between you and these platforms was never equal. You didn't negotiate your terms. You didn't have a lawyer review them. You were handed a document written by a team of Google's attorneys, optimized to give Google maximum flexibility, and told to click agree or lose access to services you depend on. That's not a contract in any meaningful sense. It's a condition of participation. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying Google is uniquely evil. Every major platform operates this way. But Google is doing it at a scale that has no real precedent. When a single company controls your search engine, your email, your documents, your photos, your video consumption, your maps, and your phone's operating system, the question of what they can do with your data isn't a technical question. It's a question about power. You started this video not knowing this policy existed. Now you know what it says, why it was written, and exactly what to do about it. You're not paranoid for caring about this, you're paying attention. There are millions of people making these same choices, choosing encrypted email, reviewing their app permissions, migrating their data away from single points of failure. That's not extreme. That's just what it looks like to take your digital life seriously in 2025. You don't have to accept the default settings. You don't have to accept policies that were written for Google's benefit and dressed up as being for yours, your account, your data, your terms. Do the 4 steps I walked you through today, not next week, today. The policy rolls out in 2026, but the data Google processes between now and then is still subject to the changes once they take effect. The earlier you act, the less there is to consolidate. If this helped you understand what's actually happening with your Google account, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I cover these policy changes and privacy issues the moment they matter, not weeks later when the mainstream tech press finally picks it up. Drop a comment and let me know. Are you staying all in on Google, or are you starting to move things out? I read every single one.